Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. I've actually wanted to do this for a while, but life got very busy and I was working a bunch of overtime for a while, and then a whole bunch of other stories happened, so I wanted to focus on those rather than this. So this is kind of old news, and it didn't really gain a lot of traction for a while anyway, but it's something that I've wanted to do. Someone on Facebook pointed out to me that there was this piece in the Ottawa Citizen by a man named John Andrew Hart. Ontario's flag represents our history. Let's not change it. The red ensign is accused of not being reflective of a modern province. This argument misses the point of our symbols. Just going through it initially, I just thought, wow, this is actually really wrong in a variety of ways. This guy absolutely needs to be challenged on this. So if you're thinking, wait, bothered boy, are you just going to go on who knows how long of a rant about Ontario's flag? Yeah, because our flag is bullshit. This will be something I don't normally do, where we are going to go point by point in an article and just really dress it down. And so if you're not into that, I completely understand. You're under no obligations to watch this. But if you want to see how really fool-headed some people are and how the notion of Ontario proud is actually really ridiculous in a lot of ways, and why our flag is actually A, terrible, and B, absolutely trapped in the colonial past, thank you for being here. Let's jump into it. Imagine an Ontario-themed beach towel, red, white, and gold with maybe a trillium or two. That's the sort of bland and meaningless design some would have if there's any support for a recent proposal to change Ontario's flag. It is charged that the flag is a symbol of colonialism, subservience, and not reflective of contemporary multicultural Ontario. Yeah, because it isn't, and already, like, an Ontario-themed beach towel, that's kind of what our terrible red ensign copy flag looks like. A bland and meaningless design. Oh, you mean just carbon copying typical British imperial flags? Our motto is literally loyal she began, loyal she remains, because this province was settled by loyalists leaving America. For the longest time, Ontario has had what amounts to a British Empire fetish. So now, with Toronto being a massive city and home to, like, I don't know, 1 in 10 Canadians at this point, and with the face and culture of the province changing every day, yeah, this old flag about, God save the Queen, yeah, it's very outdated. Now, again, to sort of provide a bit more context, this guy here, Mr. Hart, is mad about a petition that was launched to change the Ontario flag to be more inclusive and distinct. Which, okay, fair enough. But unfortunately, he's just really exposing himself here. We can surely marvel at the sheer longevity of the Union flag's association with Ontario. The Hudson's Bay Company first flew the modified red ensign as early as 1682. Our provincial flag's symbolism can therefore represent a continuity between Ontario's past, present, and future, spanning a period of almost 350 years. Impressive by any North American standard. Yay, we're proud to fly the modified British red ensign flag of a company that owned native land that was equivalent in size to all of Western Europe? Corporations provided the historic basis for our flag. Isn't this great? Also, that flag was first flown as early as 1682. Ontario, as we know it today, was originally, where all the people live, was originally part of New France until the end of the 7 Years' War. Which means, technically speaking, in that sense, we should incorporate a few more French symbols, but whoa. Also, has anyone bothered to ask the natives on this? Now, to his credit, he does point out why red ensign bad. The Union flag can be associated with many past ills and injustices. But acknowledging this and seeking to be better is not to exclude that its symbolism can also be equally emblematic of success. The cornerstones of our prosperous, open, inclusive society, parliamentary democracy, the rule of law, free trade, and our conception of human rights and liberties have been derived from British institutions. Make no mistake, these are now adopted and adapted as Canadian institutions. Nonetheless, our provincial flag is a polite nod of gratitude to their origins. A prosperous, open, and inclusive society built on a massive Indigenous graveyard and at their expense, and parliamentary democracy, which, as I've pointed out before, actually has a ton of flaws, and isn't really democratic, and human rights and liberties, which we continue to violate and try and subvert, have been derived from British imperial institutions. These are now adopted and adapted as Canadian institutions. Yeah, because Canada is a direct legacy of the British Empire. No wonder this guy loves Ontario's flag. It reminds him of the good old days when men were civilized and Indigenous people were in residential schools to become civilized. Oh, whoops, I said the quiet part out loud. But then the absolute highlight of the article, can we please get over our colonial cringe? We are a nation that has been self-governing since 1848 and whose constitution is amongst the oldest in the world. If we retain a flag from our colonial past, it is because it is a genuine symbol of Canadian nationhood. The British Union flag and the French Imperial fleur-de-lis paired together on our national coat of arms are both legitimate Canadian symbols. Hey, so then, quick question here, and I will actually revisit this later. But then if this is so important, why do we currently have our actual Canadian flag? Why not just keep it as the Union Jack, which flew for, again, many of these periods? He's talking about the Hudson Bay Company flag, when the main flag that was flown over British forts, cities, settlements, towns, campsites were the Union Jack itself and not the modified red ensign. Why did we decide to try and have our own flag rather than just fly the Union Jack? Also, he says we've been self-governing since 1848, and I know he means that in the sense of responsible government, but he doesn't actually list all the ways in which that had to bloodily happen, which just reminds me that's yet another period of pre-Confederation Canadian history I should really cover in depth, but anyway. The Ontario Red Ensign is accused of not being reflective of modern Ontario. This argument misses the point of our symbols. It is the red and white maple leaf that alone represents us as Canadians, regardless of background. Our national flag says who we are and who we shall be as a diverse multicultural society. Provincial flags, by contrast, reflect the rich heritage of our origins. From the symbolism of Nunavut's Inukshuk to Quebec's Royal Banner of France to Nova Scotia's Scottish Lion Rampant. Vive la différence! I'm so glad he brought this up! Remember how I said I would revisit that earlier point? Well, it's time to do that. Believe me, I've double checked, and nowhere does Mr. Hart ever take a moment to actually explain where Ontario's flag history comes from. Before 1965, Ontario didn't have its own provincial flag. The flag of Nova Scotia that he talks about was adopted in 1929. Nunavut's flag was, of course, adopted when it became its own territory in 1999. Ontario has been one of the founding provinces since 1865. What happened a century after the birth of the nation that caused Ontario to maybe want to have its own flag? I'm going to get to that as just kind of the final dunk on this whole terrible article and why this man does not deserve to be listened to. Ontario's political origins lay as a destination for the Loyalists, Indigenous and American refugees who came to this land fleeing persecution from the newly formed United States of America. Under the Union flag, they found safety and security and forged a new society, laying the foundations of the vibrant Ontario of today. Later, the Union flag again represented the symbol of freedom and security, this time for escaped American slaves fleeing to British North America with the Underground Railroad. The Union flag, not the red ensign or the defaced red ensign of the Hudson Bay Company, or Ontario's flag, which didn't exist until 1965. The Union Jack. So if it's all very important to you, why not just wave the Union Jack? I think there can be no more profound statement of our provincial flag's continued relevance than that, more than 2 centuries later, refugees from every corner of the earth continue to seek and freedom and security. Good to know the Ottawa Citizen is doing a bang-up job on editing. Under that very same emblem. The emblem people are coming to because it is now a federal responsibility is the Canadian flag. Refugees aren't going around various different corners of the world saying, "Oh, wave Ontario flag, yeah! I want to live in Ontario!" It's the Canadian flag, my guy. Don't worry, folks, we're nearly done here. Our symbols can be what we wish them to be. Canada in the 1960s rejected the red ensign as an emblem of immature nationhood. Yet it was also recently endorsed by a majority of New Zealanders who chose to retain it in their national flag. Charges of ethnic exclusivity would be met with bemusement by Fijians. Half-hearted proposals to change Fiji's iconic noble banner blue were shelved after its flag, inclusive of the Union flag, became the focal point for the South Pacific nation's pride after winning its first Olympic gold medal in 2016. Okay, hold up. It is still a thing that Aussies and New Zealanders have to deal with about the difficulty in telling their flags apart, especially from a distance, and even foreign heads of state getting it mixed up to great embarrassment. And also, these are two different nations with also different backgrounds that are also in many ways younger than Canada. New Zealand was first really being settled by white people in 1840, by which point white people had been in Canada, be they French or English, Scottish, Irish, etc., for at least 2 centuries at this point. The history is different. We are different nations. And then there's also basically just giving away the point with Fiji's flag of, yeah, you know, maybe we should change it. It is kind of colonial, but then they won an Olympic gold medal. And then everyone says, oh, you know what? Actually, maybe we can keep it because look, it's a moment of national pride. And well, that's the flag, the banner. That's not the winning argument. That's a moment of convenience and happenstance. So, change Ontario's flag? No thanks. It symbolizes our proud heritage of success as we look to the future. Let's keep Ontario-themed beach towels on the sand, not flying from our flagpoles. So, here's the thing, and again, like I said, we've gone through the entire article. I've not missed anything. I've not taken anything out of context. It is all there. Source in the description down below for your own personal viewing and hilarity. And so this entire article overlooks the one big glaring flaw in all of his arguments, because if he ever mentioned this, he would swiftly realize that he has no actual argument. Ontario's flag was adopted in 1965 by Conservatives as a direct pushback against the Canadian maple flag, which is our current flag today. Conservative Premier John Robarts made it so that Ontario would have its own version of a red ensign. And these Conservatives decided to have this new flag because of, again, a lot of the pushback against the new flag of Canada, which we all know and love today, because by their own words and reasoning, Canadian troops had fought and died under the red ensign in World War II, and so changing the flag was a smack in the face of their sacrifice. And it's funny that Mr. Hart here, who wrote this article, is decrying the very positions that were taken by a few people in Ontario back in the day. The only opposition came from Sudbury Liberal Member of Provincial Parliament Elmer Sofa, who was fervently opposed to the flag, that being the flag of Ontario, arguing that it failed to reflect Ontario's diverse character and that it was a flag of revenge against the new national flag. And this is also why Manitoba has a very similar flag to Ontario, because it was adopted under nearly identical circumstances. Manitoba Conservatives did not like the idea of getting rid of the red ensign under which Canadians had fought and died in World War II, and so they adopted, for the first time ever, a provincial flag, basically as revenge against the new maple leaf flag. So in a really roundabout and unfortunate way, Mr. Hart is right. Ontario's flag does represent our history. It represents British imperial history and colonialism and angry conservatives desperate to cling on to the past under any circumstances. But for all his crowing about how the modern flag is totally fine, no, the allegations he tries to diminish against Ontario's flag are absolutely correct. It is a symbol of colonialism. It is an image of subservience to the British Empire because conservatives, especially back then, really loved the British Empire. And so that current flag, which was created in 1965 as a fuck you to the maple leaf flag of Canada, is absolutely not representative of Ontario today. So yeah, as you can see, there was a whole lot in this article that just absolutely rubbed me the wrong way and leaves out really key details and context. It even tells on itself, but most egregiously, it does not talk about the actual history of Ontario's flag and who passed it and why they did. And so the disingenuousness of this author is definitely what's bothering me today.